There's only a handful of players in NBA history who came into the league with as much adoration and publicity as Blake Griffin. Right from the get-go, he was destined to be a superstar. From his off-court persona to his on-court charisma and high-flying brilliance, combined with the exposure from the new generation of social media, Griffin had the perfect blueprint for success. Everyone wanted to watch him play, and from the early stages of his career, it certainly looked like he was going to become the next great superstar. That never came to fruition. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today let's talk about how good was prime Blake Griffin actually. A man who once dominated all the headlines, but fell off drastically by his late 20s. Early in his NBA career, Griffin displayed an all-around skill set rarely ever seen from a guy of his size. You look at him and you look at his playstyle and you think, flashy dunker and high-flying athlete. At a glance, you would think he isn't much different than all the athletic big men before him. He initially drew comparisons to Amar'e Stoudemire, and when Chris Paul joined the Clippers, this comparison seemed reasonable. The team consistently ranked near the top in pick-and-roll efficiency and frequency, which makes sense considering they had two athletic bigs who were unstoppable near the basket, plus an all-time great point guard. But Griffin was different. He wasn't in the same mold as your typical explosive power forward, who just catches lobs all day. Right from the start, he was a complete player. The dude also happened to be one of the best passers and ball handlers at his position, and he had those instincts from a young age too. Heck, even back in high school, many times he'd be in charge of running the offense and creating plays from the high post. The scouts accurately predicted this aspect of his game, and fortunately for Griffin, his skills translated pretty well to the NBA, which can't be said for most other players. Aaron Smith's pre-draft scouting report stated Griffin was, quote, very comfortable handling the ball for a post player who can dribble the ball up the floor in order to break the press and get through traffic. An excellent passer who has good vision and spots double teams quickly, finding the unguarded teammate for open shots. The coast-to-coast dunks he exhibited reminded people of a young Charles Barkley. The passing and court vision equated him to the likes of Chris Webber. The sheer explosive dunking power and pick-and-roll dominance was similar to what we witnessed from Amar'e Stoudemire on the Suns. It was like every little piece of Griffin's game was reminiscent of a dominant player of the past. Perhaps, maybe I'm overhyping him too much, but when he was healthy, there was no stopping him. It's also unfortunate that he doesn't get the credit he's due, for multiple reasons. One, Chris Paul's arrival overshadowed Griffin. I mean, I know it was considered as Paul's team and the Clippers would not be good without him, but it was Griffin's team just as much. They needed each other. 2, the Clippers did not have much playoff success. And 3, Griffin routinely got injured around the time the playoffs started, which is basically why they didn't have much playoff success. In the 6 seasons Griffin made the playoffs with the Clippers, he was injured for half of them. They were all freak injuries too. In 2013, during a scrimmage in between playoff games, he injured his ankle when he landed on Lamar Odom's foot, his own teammate. In 2016, Griffin aggravated a quad injury in the middle of the playoffs again. In 2017, he injured his toe after Game 3 against the Jazz. It's not only unfortunate, but the fact that he gets injured literally in the middle of the playoffs, that's even worse. He rolls into the postseason healthy and bam, he's out. Chris Paul had some pretty bad luck too. In the years when Griffin was healthy though, the Clippers looked very, very good. In 2014, they were so close to knocking out the Thunder in the semis. If it wasn't for a series of blunders down the stretch, they could have taken that series. Then in 2015, they blew a 3-1 lead to the Rockets, another series that they definitely could have won. That loss was devastating, and when Griffin was asked about it years later, he stated, "It's hard to shake something like that. A cloud hung over us." We've all heard it before, this Clippers team was way too talented to not even make the conference finals. Not even once. On the other hand, maybe they didn't have the drive or mentality to do so. Behind the scenes, there were rampant rumors of dysfunction within the Clippers locker room during those years. animosity between Chris Paul and Doc Rivers, between Blake Griffin and Chris Paul, with years of trade rumors sprinkled in. Griffin has said the discourse was overblown because they played in LA and everything gets examined under a microscope. It wasn't as dysfunctional as it looked, according to him. However, the fact is, they had the talent, but not the camaraderie. That much is true. As an individual player, Griffin was incredibly gifted, but his weaknesses were also quite apparent. For one, his stamina and endurance was called into question on numerous occasions. In the playoffs, he'd get exhausted by the fourth quarter and run out of steam. As talented as he is, we've never truly seen Blake take over a playoff game, or take over in the fourth quarter. Don't get me wrong, he's had some fantastic performances, but there haven't been any memorable ones that make us go, wow, this guy is going to take over the league one day. We never thought that about Griffin. He just never had that it factor, the mentality of guys like Luka or Giannis, who everyone knew would one day be the faces of basketball. Nobody thought that about Griffin. In his prime, Griffin's work ethic was also put into question. While he was a dedicated player and wanted to win, he did not go the extra mile. He didn't put in the extra work that you need to elevate yourself from an all-star to a superstar. I forgot who I heard this from, but a prominent reporter on TV years ago said that Griffin had the talent of a superstar with the mentality of a role player. That's a quote that stuck with me for a long time, because, well, it's kinda accurate. Not all players want to go above and beyond their limits. Griffin was content with what he was given, with what he had. Plus, on the other end of the court, defense was never his strong suit. For a guy as athletic as he was held back by his rather poor wingspan and mediocre lateral quickness. That's why he never accumulated many steals or blocks, and routinely registered a negative defensive real plus-minus in most years. It was an area of his game that his frontcourt partner, DeAndre Jordan, had to cover him for. Now, I'm not trying to diminish his accomplishments though. By the young age of 25, he was already a 5-time All-Star with 4 All-NBA selections. It was more so the injuries than anything else that hampered his progress. By his mid to late 20s, he started to have trouble just staying on the floor. Ultimately, with Griffin's injuries, along with the Clippers stagnating for a few years, they traded him to Detroit. Now, this is where I feel like Griffin earned everyone's respect. The dude got traded to a team that was tanking, and he could have easily mailed it in and not try at all. We've seen players do that before. They flat out refuse to report to the team if they have no hope of reaching the playoffs, so they sit out and force a trade. But that wasn't the case with Griffin. Instead, he worked harder than ever with his rehab and successfully recovered. It led to one last dominant season from him. In the 2018-19 season, Griffin appeared in 75 regular season games, the most games he's played in over 5 years. He averaged 24.5 points a game, the most points of his career. And perhaps the most impressive part? He all of a sudden had a 3-point shot. Griffin hit 36% of his threes and took 7 attempts per game, which was a crazy development. In his 7 seasons in LA, he never took more than 2 per game. Most seasons, he didn't even average 1 3-point attempt a game. It seemed like his career was over when he got traded, but it all came together in Detroit. It was the most complete Blake Griffin we've ever seen in his entire career. This was a shocking resurgence, but a pleasant surprise. Even more surprising, he somehow managed to lead the Detroit Pistons to the playoffs. Unfortunately, Griffin's fantastic season came to a screeching halt. Towards the end of the season, his knee was starting to degrade, and he was forced to sit out the first 2 playoff games. In Game 3, he returned in front of a roaring crowd, applauding him for his efforts on a season that looked all but over. While he did finish out the season strong, the Pistons eventually got swept. And a few weeks later, Griffin underwent a major knee procedure. He was never the same again. And I think it's safe to say that last season in Detroit marked the end of Griffin's prime. So, how good was prime Blake Griffin actually? At his peak, he was as talented as any top 5 player in the NBA. One of the most all-around power forwards we've ever seen, a skill set that we probably won't ever see replicated in the near future. A dynamic, high-flying athlete with the ball handling and court vision of a guard, but it's also fair to say he had some weaknesses too. A lackadaisical postgame that he never really developed as much as he could have. a below-average defensive instinct, combined with a mindset that didn't make you believe he wanted to reach the next level. Overall, his best years were cut short, and perhaps the Clippers could have gone further had him and Paul stayed healthy. Anyway, that's all folks. Let me know your thoughts on Blake Griffin. Where do you rank him among the greatest power forwards of all time? The list is kinda stacked, but I feel like he has to be in the top 20 or so, right? In terms of pure talent, he could have done so much more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.